Yeah, I was going to ask just if you had any insight about why something like this could happen, like how a memo like this could be, lost through communication. But I was going to say maybe it has something to do about Trump just not really knowing enough about foreign policy, but it also probably has a little to do with the fact that generals will just flat out lie, because we have examples of officers or generals lying about how many troops are in a certain area. I don't know if you remember, but and I think was it Syria? Um,
Yeah.
he lied about how many troops were in Syria to Trump. So I have no
Yeah.
idea.
So there's two things. One, I do feel like, I mean, the whole idea that there was a coup against Trump in the Pentagon is kind of tongue in cheek, because ultimately what happened was that he dashed off this memo. Um, Doug McGregor and Trump's confidants crafted, a special order, an official order. And when the generals got wind of it, and even his acting defense secretary, Christopher Miller, got their hands on it, they went back to Trump and they convinced him that it wasn't doable. And so I think, much to his, frustration, he wasn't able to rally, I don't want to say enough courage, but he probably didn't feel like he had the best arguments against it. And what they were saying was, if you leave Afghanistan this abruptly, it'll be another Saigon, and this is going to be on your hands. And I believe, and this was even in the Axios reporting, that this was always something that had troubled uh, Trump, and had sort of been staying his hand. This idea that he would be blamed if you had these images of, or these Saigon-like images of people, clinging to helicopters, getting out of Kabul, or whatever you imagine, whatever scenario. But I
Mhm.
think he probably said, "Yeah, okay, I just can't do it." And that's how the memo got changed to the 2,500 troops coming home instead, and so on and so forth. So I think part of it was that Trump wasn't completely confident in going up against his generals. He was in awe of these military men from the start, and I think that was always a problem. He talked a tough game, and we have plenty of examples, like Bob Woodward's book, about how he clashed with his generals at these meetings and everything. But I think at the very heart of it, that he didn't feel absolutely confident in going toe to toe with them on these military issues. And so he caved at the last minute.
Yeah.
And I think that's why the Axios writers, Jonathan Swan, and I think it was Zachary Bousset, had said, said something to the effect of, like, and this was the last time that, Trump had caved on his pledge to end forever wars. And because it ultimately was his decision. But you talked about the shell game that had been played and the lies that had been conveyed to Trump, on Syria. And I think you're referring to James Jeffrey, who was the US envoy to Syria, who, after he left the post, pretty much bragged to the media that he and the military had basically colluded to sort of shifting numbers around whenever they had to talk to Trump about how many troops we actually had in Syria. And he called it a shell game. And it's really unfortunate, because there was no repercussions for that. We still don't know how many troops we have in Syria, because the military is not giving us that information. And so we have people who, like the Project on Government Oversight, have been having to go to lawyers and sue the government to try to get this information on how many forces we have in these areas, including Syria. And so here we have a U.S. envoy who's supposed to be working for Trump, basically bragging that he was hiding that information from the president. And to make even matters more sickeningly worse, James Jeffrey just went and joined the West Exec Consulting firm, which is a consulting firm started by Michelle Flournoy and Anthony Blinken, to basically help the private sector get contracts from the DoD, like high level clients like Google and, the rest of Silicon Valley and Amazon and who knows who, because they won't give you their full client list. But it's like, it's failing up. It's typical Washington. So this guy brags about lying to the president, and now he's got a cushy job at one of the most formidable consulting firms in Washington, DC. So give it a name.